Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This is the month of September. As many of you may know, it's World Suicide Day within the month and also Recovery Month. And I just want to share with those listening in the United States, actually, suicide rates came down a little bit in 2018-20, but it is coming back up. And the reason I'm sharing this is because the data suggests, especially since 2018, that has increased 37%. So it's important for us to always remember that there are fluctuations, but also it's not about the numbers, about the people, those people affected by suicide, and those who are still the ripple effect beyond that. I also want to share with those around because of World Suicide Day. There's certain countries who are have higher statistics of suicide, and some of them are below. One notable, since I'm half Korean, I noticed that South Korea is on that list. It's something to be reminded of how suicide touches everyone and anyone. So just in regards to that, and also just to give you some more recent numbers. When it comes to overdose death, it did go down 2%, but just as you saw with suicide rates, they do fluctuate. But it's really not about the numbers, but understanding that just gives us a measurement that there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to this. I want to also just last month we really focused on communities. This month we're paying tribute to those who are struggling with substance use disorder and those recognizing the ripple effects of suicide has on the community. Today we have a new guest. Her name is Tonya Bruton. How do you say?
Bruton.
Okay.
Bruton.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight. I just want to give. I always appreciate all new guests coming into the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
No worries. I just want to give a disclaimer. Those who are in the United States. 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. I do encourage you to find what resources working in the mental health field. I don't reinvent the wheel. What resources, what groups you're involved with. I think the most important thing for me is if I could say I need help and not feel like I can't, that's an environment you need to be around. So those, as adults, it's hard for us to ask those three questions. I always say people say it better than me. So we're going to start off with a quote and we'll get started. It's from Robin Williams, near and dear. He says, I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, he was a wonderful person and a great actor, and unfortunately ended his life, I think it was back in 2014, but he was a very bright man. But I think he suffered from bipolar disorder, but I'm not real sure on that. But anyways, it brings to mind, honestly, my mother, a dear friend of mine, that I'd lost a dear friend 2 years ago to suicide. And then my mother, she's still with me, thank the Lord, but she has attempted several times. And I have experience with it as well. So I just think about how, with as far as mental health goes, and that's where, suicide is, in the mental health area. And I think that I don't think the people that are surrounded by us mean to make us feel alone at all, but they don't understand, I think, or we assume they don't understand, or we project that they're going to assume we just want attention, or even worse, they'll give us attention. Sometimes, that's not what we want. But we just need to be heard. And so we tend to stay within and feel alone, even when we are surrounded by people. That's a really sad, isolating feeling. So, I mean, I guess that, that's what I feel really sad when I hear the quote.
Yeah, it means that environment is very personal. It's very subjective. It's not like I can say, "Oh, this environment will work well with you, Tonya," or vice versa. Because I think a lot of times we just assume, and I think this quote really gives them some insight about. It's not just about the proximity of people. it's a type of connection and environment that you produce. The environment, and as we know, the environment can play a huge role in someone's overall stability. If they don't feel that they could be heard, like you mentioned before, if they don't feel they could actually say, I need help, if it's, I think it can be very difficult finding that stability, finding that kind of, so I tend to try to, especially as sad as it is, to hear a quote from someone who passed in that way. It reminds me of all the work that needs to be done, all the reminders we need to know that it's not simply just putting people with people. I kind of joke. It's like maybe I have a friend that's a girl. I'm like, oh, she'll like my other friend that's a girl. Now, how many times does that work? It doesn't always work that well. So, that assumption, I know it's comical, but at the same time, it's that assumption that certain environments will work for everyone. Anyway,
well, I think sorry, yeah, it's also applicable to not just the suicide issue, but with recovery. Community in your environment is huge. When an addict or alcoholic is sobering up or getting clean, of course, one of the main things they say is you got to change the people, places, and things. And the people is a hard one. Sometimes it's not so hard to cut off from your old associates, but it is difficult to reach out to the newer, healthier community. Like you say, it's not just matching people with people, but the right connections, and especially in recovery, that's where a lot of, if you attend if you do 12 steps or attend like meetings or support groups, there you're going to find a community of like-minded people, or those who have also experienced addiction or struggle with the same issues, and that's really vital and important for recovering addicts as well. So community and environment.
Yeah, and I think I try to say with working in the mental health field, personalize your care, but don't make everything outside personal. Because a lot of times, it's like I might say, when it comes to mental health medication, a lot of times medication management can be very difficult because your body doesn't adjust, people respond differently. Sometimes those who are listening, I'm just giving you an illustration, obviously protecting those who I work with, but sometimes it gets, the only connection they have may be the providers at the outpatient, and they may really like those people, so they don't want to disappoint them. So even if the medication is not working, won't say anything because they don't get that kind of connection. And people won't understand it. Don't you want to get better? Well, it's not that, so encouraging an environment where it's, safe. But when I think about safe, it's a process. So what I'm really thinking about is if accountability becomes not a bad word when it's a positive group, if I messed up, especially with recovery, because both Recovery Month is, it's nice to get those, those milestones, 3 years sober, 5 years sober, whatever it may be. But the most important thing is that when to ask for help and you get back on it.
Yes.
If that makes
No, I totally agree. I think that is a vital point in recovery. Especially, you mentioned, if we learn to reach out in the first place, then relapse is less likely to occur because we do have that accountability. That's, like you said, that is a positive thing, because a lot of times we're subjective about ourselves. We're not going to see behaviors and things like that are going to lead along down the road to being more and more destructive, which will eventually lead into a relapse. So having those positive accountability in there will a lot of times prevent that. But then, like you say, even if it doesn't, if you do slip, ask for help, get up, move, get up and dust it off and move it on as quickly as possible. And to do that, a lot of times you need to reach out and don't let the guilt or embarrassment or shame, or how many times have I came and told this person I've messed up and here I come again. That doesn't matter. You're worth it. You're worth it. Whatever it takes.
Hmm.
to, so asking for help is crucial,
Yeah, and a lot of times, sometimes these things take time, and the process itself is the journey to recovery, the healing. And a lot of times, unfortunately, just like anyone, not to use just recovery, we like the things to go quickly. One and done, but a lot of times we do that alone. African out proverb, I love what it says. It says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think a lot of times when the communities, recovery communities, this is kind of what I think of. I'm a faith-based leader, but this does, when I think about just the whole aspect of recovering hope, it's not about, at least for me, when I started this podcast, it's not about proselytizing, but actually just keeping the conversation going. Keep people engaged and understand that we do better. Even if you're an introvert out there, I know I'm kind of like a introvert. I can act as an extrovert, but it's important for us to stay connected. We're not islands. If that anything comes to mind when you see this proverb, the African proverb?
Yeah, I mean, well, I agree, and I would go on to say it kind of makes me think as far as like, if when I go quickly, that usually tends to mean that I've gone without thinking too much out. And so usually even if I get from point A to point B and I get there quickly, it may not last. So that's why I like where it says, if you want to go far, if you want to see 10 years, 20 years, or even if it's not addiction, if you want to just see, like you say, anyone improvement in your character or how you relate to people, or growth, personal growth, then it's good, because everybody has different gifts. And so when you're part of a community that where you're lacking, you're going to benefit from everyone in your circle, and then you guys can go further. It's going to be more solid of a foundation, right? Longer lasting, more fruitful growth and change. So that's kind of where I got from that.
Yeah, and I think if you want to go far, go together. I think in that portion is like learning different thoughts. Learning from other people. I know not all advice may be helpful, but it's good to be around people who it's good to listen. And that may take it a little bit slower, but at the same time, it may be more sustained because you took the time to think about the steps you're taking. Does that make sense?
No, right. Exactly.
And I want to give a lot of times new guests or even returning guests, especially if there's been some time, but you're a new guest, Tonya, and I want to give you a little bit of moment to take your time to share what brought you here, what brought you to doing what you're doing. And there's a little bit about your story, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, of course. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Well, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and I may say things and with a straight face that sound, why isn't she getting emotional? But that's just how it goes. But what got me here really, I guess, goes back to November of last year. I went into treatment. I was hospitalized I needed some trauma. I needed to work out some traumas that were things were rearing their ugly head, and things I didn't even realize I had were displaying in awful ways. And then yes, substance abuse was in there too. It was just a conglomerate. But I went in. I was in there over a month and a half, 40 days, something like that. But in there, I got some. I do suffer from some mental disorders. Bipolar is genetic on my mother's side, and then complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And when I was recently hospitalized, I was given an additional diagnosis of DID. So, so while I was there, I did some EMDR treatments, which were very, very helpful in things I'd blacked out or came back. I was able to reorder sequences of events as they were. It was really helpful. And while I was there, though, it was dual. So you had, it was maybe 80% trauma focus. And then, they did focus on the substance abuse stuff. So I had both things. So while I was there, I don't know if the readers are familiar with the 12 steps of, there's Alcoholics Anonymous and different ones, but they all kind of have 12 same steps. But anyways, in the 12th step, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, or as a result of working this program, we continued to carry this message to other addicts or alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And it came to me, I don't know if you said this, this faith-based show, so I could talk about God, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if God told me, or, if it just was inspiration or came to me, but I had been a chronic relapser for quite some time, and I couldn't get myself all figured out. I had, just like I said, so many different issues. And something told me, you're neglecting that 12th step, the part about carrying the message, the part about giving back and serving others. I would get to a point of being stable and sober in the past, and then I'd just sit on it, and I'd be passive, and I would just kind of sit in I'm sober, and I would just sit in my sobriety, sit in that kind of comfort, complacent place, and then it would only last for so long, and I'd fall off the edge again. So it just came together when I got out that I had that inspiration, and someone who had no business even thinking of me, that I had known from years back, says, hey, I'm starting this radio station. I think you should do a show. I think you have a lot to say. And I was like, I prayed about it, and I thought, well, maybe this is, part of the purpose. I've been praying for a purpose, so that honestly, for selfish reasons, to help me, right? I want to help others, but it was kind of like the accountability. I mean, it gives me accountability. It gives me something to do with my time and feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose. But what that was is that I ended up starting a podcast, and I never thought I would be doing that. I completely exposed myself in my podcast. It's called the Grit and Grace Podcast. And I got the grit because I've had a really gritty, dirty, rough life where I've had to use determination to get through. And then the grace is because without the grace of God, I would not have made it through. So it's grit and grace. But so I use the podcast. So far, I've used the podcast to highlight, like you're doing here, stories of bring on guests to share their stories of recovery from addiction, trauma issues, abuse, and so on and so forth. I do Bible studies and things like that. I highlight issues that I did one as far as like we evaluated the current methods that churches implement in their recovery programs and how effective they were, and what some solutions were to maybe make them more effective. So I'm trying to use the podcast as a platform to bring hope to others, a light, but also some knowledge about, from a former addict and a person who's living with mental disorders, trying to give them some of my experience and knowledge on the subject. I have people reach out and ask, hey, I've got a son or loved one who's strung out in addiction, and what's your advice on a rehab, or what should I do? And I have addicts reach out and ask for help. And, sometimes I don't see any results, but that's really not what I'm focusing on, and that's hard to do. But the point is we plant the seeds, right? We do God's will and fulfill the purpose he has for us. And so it's just been really going great. I just get out there and I tell my story, which is quite interesting. And it can be really embarrassing, but I try to think about the higher purpose in it, and hope that someone feels like, I'm not the only one, or hey, I did that too, or so, and can feel like they can relate. But that's, I'm open if you got any questions, if you want me to go in deeper or give you any more explanations, but like in a nutshell, that's kind of why I'm here doing what I'm doing today, is because of the experience I had in November at the hospital. So
I just want to commend you. It's not easy to put yourself out there, and also, it's hard, especially those. I went through EMDR, and it was helpful for me too. And I would say there's, whatever's out there, especially those listening, If you were, I don't know, if you had an illness that's physical and you weren't sure, you will get a second opinion. I encourage those who are listening, get a second opinion. Treat it like it is. Don't treat it like, if you really, um, you know, obviously when you're in recovery, when you are struggling with mental illness, it may not feel, you feel a lot of times like a burden. You feel like you're not really, but eventually, I would encourage those listening that take steps towards at least the very idea. What can you control today? I want to feel better. Okay, I don't feel good today. Maybe I should go see someone. Maybe I should go, like you mentioned, 12 steps. Maybe I should go to the group. Maybe I should get a sponsor. Maybe I should get someone to help me, hold me accountable. A lot of times it's just all you can control is what you can control, and sometimes that's all you need to do at the moment. But eventually, like you mentioned, I remember, at least for me, helping others became my healing. Serving others became my recovery in that regard. Understanding that giving back is wonderfully healing. It gives you insight about yourself. It's awkward. I do encourage it. I do encourage, and I do. I want to say, it's not easy to put yourself out there, but I do feel it can be very helpful for those listening, and probably from your podcast, and it's encouraging to know that you're not alone. So I do appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
And one of the I want to say also, it's hard to navigate. We're always told to be nice as kids or what, but it's very vague what that means. But I kind of like the word kind better, because it doesn't
Yeah.
really ask for anything back. Nice is kind of sometimes used to, I want to be nice, and I'm an avoidant person, so that means I want no one to bother me, not things that, you try to make. But there's this word called Ubuntu. It's, as South Africa says, I find my worth in you and you find your worth in me, can be very roughly translated as human kindness. I feel that this is ideally what we're looking at. Sometimes we're just so, I guess, our external worries about how others will see us sometimes trump our own needs and what may help us. So finding appropriate boundaries can be very helpful, and creating an environment that's important and conducive moving forward. Any thoughts of this quote or anything that was said?
Oh, well, what you said there about boundaries, that's huge. That was a huge problem in my life, is that I had none, much less healthy ones. I didn't have any. But the quote, definitely, we're all interconnected. And being Christians, especially, we're the body of Christ. In the Bible it talks about, is the thumb any less important than the heart or the lung? I mean, we all are valuable and contribute different gifts, but we all need each other. But yeah, definitely. But we have to be careful too. That's where the boundaries come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, for me, I came from another side. Like, I didn't really go to church when I was younger. I remember one thing that drew me to church really was, honestly, some of the things that you go through science. I went through thermodynamics class in university, and the first two laws of thermodynamics kind of stumped me, because you can't create energy from nothing, nor can you destroy energy, which
Right.
kind of makes me like, well, what does that mean? And also, second rule is that everyone, it's kind of depressing, but everything breaks down to the simplest form, which means that there's this kind of impending death. And the one thing that I liked when I read the Bible later on, I remember going to church, and my dad's like, "You want to go to church?" I was, trying to start fresh. Came down, and I'm like, "It sounds horrible," but I was good at the sound. I used to do sound in high school, and I was very musical for a while. And I said, "You know what? I'm not listening to the sermon, but I'll make them heard." And that's all I did. I focused on one thing. Eventually, I got really, I realized that I was very good at connecting with those in the congregation. I got more involved, and yeah, it may come from another I've had door in, but I think it's a fresher perspective. I do find thinking about the Bible, I did read a lot of Job and its commentary, Ecclesiastics, and a lot of
I
people say,
love
"Oh, those things."
Ecclesiastes.
They're like, "Oh, it's so depressing," but for me, it's kind of a commentary of what we do all the time, and like I said, I get all types of listeners and guests, so I think there's lessons in anything. There's older um, lady I remember at church. She said people are either lessons or blessings. So I'm like, okay. So, but I just find that in truth, we do try to self-preserve. So whether you're agnostic, atheist, or whatever, you're still there's this kind of whatever your circle is, your family. You want them to do well, and it's I think for me what drew me to faith was that everything changes so much, and those who in recovery, those who had mental health issues, those who attempted suicide or been around that understand that change is not always good when it's going so fast. So for me, knowing that there was something bigger than me that didn't change, that itself was comforting. That was enough for me, and from drawing from that. So again, I don't proselytize, but I do find something bigger than yourself. Volunteer, do something that may be helpful. It's not, sometimes getting out of our own self could be the best thing.
Right.
Yeah, and starting, and like I said before, controlling. I would say just work on things you can control. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but one thing you may want to, I think, Lao Tzu, and just to segue. I love what he says here, and I want to get your thoughts. He says, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. Kind of, it's interesting to think it that way, but I think it's very true. We understand things backwards, but you can only understand for so long. Eventually, you have to move forward. So, anything come to mind when you hear this quote?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020 is what they say, but it is very true. I mean, we walk by faith, not by sight, until we can look back and go, oh, that's why that happened, or I shouldn't have done such and such. But so yeah, we definitely cannot live in the past. It's not, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's where, I'm sorry, I quote a lot of, I like the Bible, but it says,
yeah, that's totally fun.
Yeah, it's like, that's why it says, and we forget those things that are behind, and we press on, to the prize before us. We can't, living in the past is just, it's unproductive. And you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So yeah, to get forward, we look back long enough to glean the lesson and hopefully apply it. I love Ecclesiastes, by the way, and Proverbs too. But Ecclesiastes, to me, it's not sad. I mean, to me, it kind of is a little relieving. But when you realize that everything is meaningless, so just trust God. But so definitely, you take what you can, you learn the lesson, and you apply the wisdom, right? As you move forward.
And branching off, Martin Luther King Jr. When he was alive, he said this one thing that kind of mirrors or parallels what we're saying. You don't need to know the whole staircase to take the first step. So a lot of times in life, I know, like, we want to have 100% certainty of whatever we're doing. It's nauseating when you go on trips with these people, because literally they have the whole itinerary plan, but eventually you're just going to have to move forward. Not everything's going to go, not all your orders at the restaurant's going to be exactly the way you wanted.
All right.
It's that, it's the incompleteness. If we really be honest with ourselves, our lives are always kind of incomplete, unfinished. And if we're okay with it, we can actually move forward in a little more productive way, as opposed to, well, this is not complete. Well, it's okay. It's okay. Let's move forward. What can we do? And what can we improve on? And I think that in itself is a lot of times freeing, because a lot of times there's always this enoughness. I want to be enough to do something, but you're doing something now. What, and that kind of thing has been, at least for me, kind of stripping through because we're on our own time. Life is way too short if you really think about it.
Yes.
Especially those who, attempted, like myself, I have attempted, and you were like, well, I shouldn't be here. You got to have this eerie feeling, and then later on, and you see other aspect of life, and you see older people living a full life. They're never talking about titles. They're never talking about anything. They're talking about the people around them. It gives me perspective of what's really important. I want to ask you, since we talked about Recovery Month, it's World Suicide Day briefly, what would you like people to remember in 2023? I know it's going to be different, but from your perspective, what would you like people to remember when we think we're really bad at remembering as human beings, but what would you like people to remember of this month and when you think about Recovery Month?
Well, I mean, I think that it's just, we should take the time out. I watched another one of your podcasts, and the guest, you guys were saying, I'm from Texas. I said y'all. That slipped out. Y'all were saying that I'm sorry, I lost my place. Can you ask me the question again?
No, in
Recovery Month. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I stumped myself. Anyways, that it should be all year long, not just a month. But it's nice, to take a whole month out to remember people that are struggling. I mean, if you look at the statistics on addiction and drug use, it's just crazy. It's worse now than ever. It's getting to where, I think it said there 1.8 million people have tried methamphetamines, in the United States. And that was like in 2018, I mean, just to take a minute and look at the situation, educate yourself about, if you don't know anyone that's suffering, look in your community, and see if there's a need. And if so, educate yourself and, maybe see if the Lord leads you, or whoever your higher power is, or your inner self, is led to, help out or contribute in some way, to serve. Because, I mean, addiction too, is really tied in with your community and your city's homelessness problem.
Yes.
And then the suicide problem as well, but the homeless problem and your community's problem with children getting removed from homes and in foster care, that a lot of that's tied to drug use. It said, I think it said 20, the government spent last year 23, it was either 23 or in the 30s billion dollars on federal drug programs. So and still we can't keep up and we can't solve the problem. So I think it's real important. I mean, because drugs affect us on every kind of level, whether it's you personally, whether it's someone in your family or in your church, in your school, your community, someone you work with. Or like I said, if it's turned into it's spilling into social issues in your where you live, right? And then, so it's affecting your pocketbook or something, right? So, but out of like you say, kindness. I like how you clarify, the nice and the kindness. Not nice seems like you say it's kind of shallow, kind of flippant. Like you said, it was your parents or your teachers say be nice, so it's you're placating and just kind of satisfying someone. But kindness comes from the heart, I believe. I think when you said the word kind, I thought of a tenderness of heart, a softness of heart towards and an openness of your heart towards people, towards other humans, like you had on there, human kindness. And so I think Recovery Month and Suicide Day is definitely about human kindness. As far as the suicide, I talked about recovery, but as far as the Suicide Day, that should definitely be more than a day. That's a huge problem. People need to know how to respond to someone who's suicidal. That's a real awkward thing. Like I said, if you got the person who's struggling, already worried about, they may think I just want attention. Well, for one, so what? Okay, if they are wanting attention, give it to them. I mean, Lord, maybe they need it. But it is, people don't know how to you feel awkward when someone comes to you and they're crying.
Yeah.
Do you want a tissue? I don't know what to do, much less what do I do if someone comes to me and they're suicidal? Well, maybe you can refer them to a hotline, or if you don't know what to say, can you refer them to a minister? So I think it's important to make sure that those of us who are involved and are educated use these days as an opportunity, to educate our communities and those that we're close with, and definitely honor and serve those that are hurting.
I do appreciate what you're saying. Also, what I find at least helpful is, remember in the beginning I said personalize your care, but also personalize the relationships you have. So if someone that I know, and I'm not saying it's easy, sometimes we blow up. The person may be suicidal. They may feel like suicide, but remember, there's still whoever it is. This is still Sarah. This is still David. This is still. So if we think about at the derivative in math equations that are huge, you think about what the core thing. This person's sad. This person needs help. If a person broke their bone in their leg, you're not going to be sitting there. Okay, how does it feel? You're going to take them to get help. Everyone has their role. I remember you mentioned in the Bible, in the body of Christ, there's always people have different skills. And a lot of times, even in my line of work as in case management and all that, I have my role. Then a lot of times the idea is to look at the person, as client-centered, but the idea is remember their names, remember who they are. Don't look at, okay, this person's in recovery, this happens a lot. In recovery, it's like, oh, this person didn't listen. He's now back on this person's struggling. Like maybe the idea is try to give him or refer him that maybe helpful. A lot of times when we generalize how we respond to people, it doesn't go well. Like if the person is your sister or is your brother, and all of a sudden now they're not your brother because they're feeling suicidal, yeah, it's going to feel weird for not only you, but for the other person. The person's still your brother. So a lot of times I try to personalize it. So remember their names. The reason that they're just sad, and it's important for us, especially to know what our limits are. If I'm uncomfortable, you're not used to, maybe you don't have anyone that who has mental illness, or at least immediately. Know the numbers, know who to call, try to find something. One thing also is a lot of people one thing that shouldn't be in talk when it comes to suicide, or obviously and when it comes to funding, it's different, but I'm saying is politics. So what I'm trying to say this real quickly, if someone has guns, it's not the time to talk about why you don't like guns, because guns is a cultural thing in America, wherever you're at. So the idea is just try to work this problem, not work your opinion. So the person that has guns, you ask them, do you know anyone who could hold your weapons while you're going through this, as opposed to just being kind of judgy about the person having guns. The idea is personalize. The person was a friend with you before, or someone who at least felt courageous enough to ask you for help. Remember that person, not what everything else so generalized. So that's what I would advise. And obviously, where everyone has a role and skill set, know what yours are. You do better when you know what your weaknesses are. Then you're kind of more prepared. Oh, I'm not good with someone who's very emotional. Well, maybe you should know the suicide like the 988 number of the United States, and just stay there with them. There's a power of presence. Just stay there, help them with the phone, just basic things. Be present with them, and then wait till they get the help that they need. It's a community effort. Like not everyone's going to be prone to getting their hands dirty, and that's understandable. That generational. Maybe you're just not around it. But if it's someone you love and someone you care, someone at the very least, find them the help that they need. And that's what I would encourage.
Yes, that's good.
This theme is one more day, and I feel that for me sounds so ominous, especially those who are not here today. But sometimes it just takes one more day. A lot of times they're going through a crisis. They just need one more day. So one more day, maybe just you sitting there, getting them to the hospital, or calling the numbers for emergency services. One more day may save a life. So, switching back to you, when you think of one more day, I know I kind of went ahead of you, but what do you think of the idea for you personally? When you think of one more day, the concept when it comes to recovery, anything come to mind or anything you want to share?
Sure, yeah. Uh, First things that come to mind, of course, is it's a cliche. You could stitch it's probably on a pillow, one day at a time, one day at a time.
Yeah.
But it's been said so much, we don't think about it. But and the fact that so much can change in a day. Like you say, that one day can make all the difference. I know that I've started out days in a complete total wreck, a complete total emotional mess, and had been spiraling out of control one way or another. And if someone had intervened, and like you said, even if they just sat with me, my husband a lot of times will turn me around when he'll say, let's go on a trail, walk on on a trail, or let's ride our bike down the end street or something. But small things, like I said, just the power of presence. Or it takes me to a meeting, or say a prayer, or whatever. You can in recovery, they say the cool thing about recovery is at any time of the day, any day, you can turn your day around. If you just stop, if things are going crud, you can stop at any moment, whether it's mid-morning or after lunch, getting on to late afternoon. You can stop, pray, meditate. Like, I'm really big on meditation. Like I say, I'm not here to force what my higher power or anyone else. Sit out in nature. It's very powerful. Sit under a tree, whatever brings you peace inside. Right. And then when you go to sleep, there 90% chance you're going to wake up and things are going to be so different. So, the power of just a night's rest. Right. And so that day, just like you said, if you could get someone through that day, and they're really big on that in the rooms of 12-step, programs and recovery programs. They take that one day at a time very seriously, because especially addicts and alcoholics, we can't think beyond that. It's too daunting for us to think, I hope I can stay clean for the rest of my life now, or I hope I can stay clean for at least 6 months. But if I can stay clean till I wake up in the morning, then wow. And then tomorrow when I wake up in the morning, I'll say a new prayer or do a new meditation and try to stay clean for tomorrow. So, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So
I heard that before,
yeah. So one day at a time. For one, just remember, that I read a book one time. I used to want to be a Christian Buddhist. So that's funny. So, but anyways, I really like some of the things about Buddhism. But anyways, so it was saying that we, only use 5% of our brains, but it's saying that only 5% of the time can our brain stay in the present. It's always in the future or in the past, right? Or what am I going to do tomorrow? If you stop and evaluate that and think about it during the day about your thoughts and track like how many of them are like in present moment. That's why they in therapy and counseling, they want to give you grounding exercises. I'm sitting in this chair. This chair is hard. I can feel the air blowing on my cheeks. It helps you get grounded into the present, and then it helps you, kind of. It minimalizes, it brings down, I guess, the intensity of what's happening to where you can kind of reset and, start over. Like I said, get into good night's rest, reset for the next day, pick yourself up and move on.
Yeah. And I think being able to know what does help you de-escalate quicker to that moment where it's not that everything's solved. And if we're really being honest, a lot of these problems are decades or longer, and they will take time. But the thing is, I think it's comforting to know that life is really the in-between, the process in it itself. And if you're able to kind of be content with that, build on that, I find that in itself is, I would I would encourage those listening. Obviously, I'm not trying to minimize what people are going through, but control what you can control today, like one day at a time, like we're talking about. But also, you're on your own time. A lot of times the world will say, "Oh, you need to do this now." I would say, encourage to keep moving forward. Of course, try to get better, find ways to build, but also never rush anything when it comes to this. If things bother you, if you're not feeling well, get help. No, it's not a blemish for wanting help. I think wanting help doesn't make you weaker. It makes you know that you're valuing yourself. You're like, well, this is not working. What can I do? And that's my final thought. I know that I'm going to ask you your final thought as we kind of wrap up. It was wonderful talking to you, Tonya. So, anything you want to share as final thought, those listening?
Oh, well, it's been wonderful talking to you too. I really enjoyed it. It's been really engaging. But you kind of stole what I was going to say. So
Sorry.
yeah. Oh no, that's fine. I was going to say asking for help is not weak. It's actually you're showing, like you say, you're valuing yourself. I was going to say that I had a note that said, if I had to say anything, it would be give yourself a break, love yourself, and forgive yourself, and resist the shame thing because it's toxic. But yeah, valuing yourself. That I've been learning about that a lot lately. The asking for help thing. Still, even I have to practice that. But I'm seeing, how beneficial it is, and I'm noticing, I'm like, why am I doing this now? It's because I'm valuing myself more. I know that
Yeah.
that is beneficial to me, and I know that I'm worth it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that it's just to add, as kids we're told to be good at giving, right? We're like but as adults we're horrible at receiving anything.
Yeah, I
so
know.
so
Whether someone gives me a present, I get so awkward opening a gift.
yeah.
I hate it. I hate it. And it's the same thing with from that to like God, or my God, or our God is like, he's gives me grace every day and forgiveness, but sometimes I'm like, oh no, I don't deserve this forgiveness because
Yeah.
this is like the 80th time I've messed up, well, that let him worry about how many times you've done it, right? If he's giving you this free gift of it, forgiveness and so you can move on, then take it. It's easier just to beat yourself up and stay in the rut, but it's a whole lot more relief and freedom on the other side, when you do accept not just, and help from other people. I definitely not one to take handouts or you mentioned earlier, we don't want to be a burden to someone, but if someone's offering, you're not a burden. You know what I mean? Trust me, people are not going to, they're not going to offer if they don't mean it. And these people, there are people, that care about you. It's a gift to them to receive it. To receive what they're giving you. Don't you feel like if you are trying to, someone's helped you out, or the minister married you and your new bride, and you want to thank him, and it's, oh no, I won't, I can't take that. It's kind of like it takes some joy away from you, the giver, right? So it's a two-way thing. It benefits you, and you're benefiting them when you allow them to help and you receive it. And let it.
And I feel that just kind of mirrors, we don't think of asking help as asking for a gift, but in a way it is. If you're feeling so, sometimes our own pride is the barrier to getting help. And I don't care if it's the 50th time. If you need help, ask for help. It's okay. This arbitrary 50 number means nothing. Just get the help, work it. Everyone's has their own context, their own story. But, the thing is, when you personalize it, when you start to see it that way, and that it's okay that you're not finished, because no one really is finished, maybe you can start looking at yourself and maybe finding other resources and steps to get to the way what success or what being better means to you. And again, thank you so much, Tonya, for joining and being part of the conversation. I want to share with those who, anything you want to share, Tonya, I will put in the notes. So those who are listening, they could look down, they could find out more about what you're up to and everything else in the notes and your podcast. All those links will be underneath those who are watching. I just want to also share with those who are listening. Remember, stay updated. Revive Ministry through the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is the website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry, leaving with this last quote from Juliette Lewis. The bravest thing I ever did was continue my life when I wanted to die.